Okay guys, well this video is an explanation about the ego, and I think it's important that we have an understanding of what the ego is. Unfortunately, there is a lot of disinformation and misinformation circulated on the internet, and particularly in the New Agey community. And we're often told that we should not be in our ego, that we should fear our ego. And, some go as far to say that we should actually remove our ego completely. And so I think it's important that we have an understanding of what the ego actually is. Because when we understand the ego, we don't need to fear the ego. And once we can perceive what the ego is, we find it a lot easier to bring the ego back into control, because that's basically what we are here to do. And that is move through our journey with not allowing the ego to override the higher self. And so it's always this constant battle between the higher self and the projected self, because that's what the ego actually is. Now, to help you get a better understanding of what the ego is, I think it's probably beneficial that we take it back to the beginning. And so if you've had a look at my previous videos, and if you haven't seen them, I would recommend that you watch the evolution of the twin souls, because that gives you an understanding of who you are and how you're manifested on this realm. But just to give you a quick overview and an understanding of this, we look to the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean ratio. And we see here that we are manifest from God consciousness, which is 0. And you can see the first two numbers are 1, 1. Now this is the male and female soul being birthed from God spark, from God consciousness. We're not actually manifested onto the physical realm. We are just the ethereal conscious aspect of who we are as a soul. And we come out as two halves to the one soul. And then we also see that the spiral moves on to 2, 3. Now this is when we get our physical attributes. And so we see these are connected to the Rider-Waite Tarot, which goes back right into ancient Egypt. I mean, there are big connections between the tarot cards and Egypt. And I would suggest that if people don't have an understanding of how important tarot cards are, that you do some research into tarot cards, because they are very symbolic and very important to us. They are part of the key that we need to unlock who we are. And so when we take this Fibonacci sequence, which is the way that nature actually expands, and how consciousness expands, how the spirit expands, how God expands, everything in nature comes back to the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean ratio. So let's have a look when we take this back to the Rider-Waite Tarot card, so we can get a little bit more of an understanding. Now, as I said, I've gone over this in the evolution of the twin souls in a lot more detail. But just to give people an idea and an understanding of who we are, we come from Orion as God consciousness, as a soul that emanates forth from God consciousness, which for our manifested world on Gaia is Orion. The Orion Nebula is Osiris and Odin, and basically our God, the consciousness that is manifested onto our realm through the mental universe. The mind is all. It's the mind projection that gets manifested physically onto Gaia. And this happens through the sun and the moon. Now, you'll see that the next two cards are the Magician and the High Priestess. Now, this is both the male and the female soul in the ethereal form. And we see that the Magician has the serpent clasped around his waist. This is the female soul that he carries within him. And the female has the serpent behind the posts here, stretched out, the long green serpent. And this is the male aspect within the female soul. And you can see also we have a circle and a straight line. And this is also symbolic of, the female and the male, the phallus and the female. So it's all in the cards. Then we come down to the Empress and the Emperor, and these are our physical attributes that we take down to us with us onto the manifested plane. So we have two parts to who we are. We have the ethereal and the physical. And all we actually understand of who we are, because we've been programmed and conditioned, is we believe that we are only in the physical. And this is where the problem comes, because we need to understand that we are actually more in the ethereal. And we need to bring ourselves back into that perspective, that understanding. It's very important that we have a true understanding of our reality, and that is that we are energetic beings. We are ethereal beings. This is who we are. This is why they hide this from us. And the magician brings the information down from the divine within him. He is the receptacle for the information of the divine. That is why Jesus is the Son of God, and that is why, Jesus is the Son of Man. It's all because Jesus is the embodiment of the male soul that is the vessel for the divine knowledge. However, it is the high priestess that is the Holy Grail. She actually has the ability to unlock the wisdom within the male, the wisdom that's been brought down from the divine. Only the female has the ability to understand and decode this information. And this is why I see it is such a shame that we have a lack of female researchers out there currently bringing forward information, because unfortunately, unless the male researchers are working with their female counterpart, they will never, ever have all of the information. It is just not possible, because that is not how nature intended, and that is not how nature works. And we can actually see this with Mary Magdalene and Jesus, and I will go into Mary Magdalene and Jesus a lot more in further videos, because there are a lot of interesting facts that need to be known about Mary Magdalene and Jesus and what they represent and who they really are. And we have been basically lied to, surprise, surprise, by the religious corporations to keep that information secret, so that only those that are in positions of power know the truth. And so we are now in a time where this information is becoming available to all of us. So let's bring it back to the ego. So we've now understood that we've emanated from Orion. We have been birthed onto the physical realm in the ethereal and the physical. So for the male, that is the magician and the emperor. And for the female, that is the high priestess and the empress. So the high priestess is the female's ethereal form. The magician is the male ethereal form. This is actually who we really are. And then these are the attributes that we're given to bring down with us to the manifested physical realm, on which we are to basically experience ourselves. And so God can experience himself through us. So now that we have been birthed onto the physical realm, let's have an understanding of what the physical realm actually is. Now, here we can see an alchemy drawing, and they've shown us what we actually need to know about the physical and the ethereal, because there are two realms manifested onto Mother Earth. We have the physical, the hard physical, and the ethereal. Now, imagine that the sun is what manifests Orion's thought projection onto our planet, and that the moon is what is needed to birth this manifested energy onto Mother Earth as well. So the sun and the moon work together, and this is why we see them in all of the Hermetic drawings. And so we can see here that we have the ether shown and we have the physical shown. Now, once again, if we can imagine that the sun hard bakes reality onto Mother Earth, well, at every instance, half of Mother Earth is always in the dark, away from the sun. And this is where we have the ethereal realm manifested onto Mother Earth. So it's almost like it's half baked on. It's a half baked on reality. And where the sun hits the planet is where the hard baked reality, the physical reality, is actually manifested. And this is why we see at night time the veil thinning, and that the ethereal world can move through that veil, and we often see reports of ghosts and unusual happenings, and they always seem to, eventuate and manifest at night. And this is because these ethereal beings can move through the veil, because they are closer to God. They are closer to the divine. So when you are in the ethereal, you always have more knowledge and you always have more skills, because you're closer to God. You are closer to God consciousness and the divine. So you are more divine. So the ethereal world is always above the physical world in way of consciousness, in way of understanding and information and knowledge, and in way of skills and abilities. So now we understand that we have two manifested realms on Mother Earth. We've got the physical and the ethereal. And over our 26,000 year cycle, because we move through a cycle on this planet over 26,000 years, which is the precessional cycle, and we move between both of these manifested realms. We go into the ethereal and we go into the physical. So when we die a physical death, our avatar expires and we die, our soul still continues on and moves into the ethereal until we are reincarnated once again back into the physical. And through these reincarnations, we work through our destiny, our God contract, until right at the end of the cycle, we go back into Zep Tepi first time. And this is where we're approaching now. This is why we are having an understanding of all of this information. It's because the light of Orion, the light of Osiris is returning, and the wisdom keepers, the first souls, are the ones that are remembering this knowledge and have the ability to remember this knowledge. And this is because they are the divine souls, the closest to God consciousness when they were birthed onto this reality. There were certain souls that came through in the beginning, and then each subsequent soul is birthed through those first souls. And so this is basically what we do, and we just expand and we multiply until the end of the cycle, and then we have the return of the light of Osiris, and we are judged. And then those souls that were found to be flawed and tainted are rejected and go back to Atum as just neutral God energy. And Atum is our galactic core. And then this is what Orion and the other nebulas utilize this energy to create souls through their consciousness. So they bring the souls into being using God's source and their thoughts. They create us, and so we're all an individual aspect of Orion. So as well as being part of Orion, we're also an individual facet of him also. Okay, so I've pretty much got the groundwork in where I wanted to go with this to start giving you an understanding of the ego. So I'm going to have to come back and do part 2, as I only have 15 minutes, unfortunately, on YouTube still, and we are not going to fit the entire discussion within this 15-minute video. So I'll be back with part 2 of what is the ego. Peace out.